Okay, it is 7 on the nose. I think we will get started, assuming we have a quorum. Becky, do we add up?
Yes.
All right, good. Then I'll call the meeting to order. And maybe this is our last Zoom meeting for a while. That's a board meeting where we're not at least getting to be face to face. So hopefully you're all excited about that. Hello, Michael. We're just getting started. Pursuant to state executive orders, which temporarily suspend the in-person presence requirement and eliminate the limitation on remote access of the Illinois Open Meetings Act. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the board is suspending the usual electronic attendance and voting section of the board bylaws and will allow all board members to attend this meeting remotely and fully participate remotely. I should know that by heart by now. Becky, if you could call the roll.
Give me just a moment. I just admitted Michael. We'll get him in here and we will. There we go. Okay, so when I call his name, he can say yes.
Okay, good.
Okay.
And Gloria just popped on too.
Yes, so I think we got a full group tonight. Okay, so here we go. Jane?
Yeah, here.
Beth?
Here.
John?
Yes.
Barb? Barb, where did you, there you are. Okay.
We see her.
I see, yeah. Okay. Charisse?
Here.
Gloria?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Michael?
Here.
And Lupe?
Here.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Becky. Are there any additions, corrections, modifications, adjustments to the agenda tonight? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Charisse. Is there a second?
Go ahead.
Who seconded it?
Jane.
Jane did.
Okay.
Okay, is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Becky, please call the roll.
Jane? Jane?
Yeah.
Okay, Beth?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
Charisse?
Yes.
Gloria?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Lupe?
Yes.
Okay, that was unanimous. The ayes have it. Is there any public comment tonight?
No.
All right. Then we'll move on to item 7, which is presentations. And we will begin with our distinguished former director, Fred Schlipp, who, as foreshadowed, we've asked to join us. He's been helping us and will continue to help us in our planning. And we're going to have a couple of topics that we've asked Fred to facilitate going through tonight. And we're going to try to keep on schedule, but the decision was made to do this in a way that gives the board a chance, as I mentioned last time, to weigh in on some of these things, to ask questions about any others that you're concerned about, and have complete transparency about this process. And so, Fred, if you are ready to take over, the board was given some essentially talking points to consider to prompt them to be ready for this. And so who knows where that will lead, but Fred, if you want to introduce the discussion and then take it away.
Okay, well, first, it's nice to see you all. What we're going to do is write what's called a building program, which is a list of all the spaces in the library and their contents and their physical relationship to each other. And it's very specifically not a picture. It is a list of required spaces. And it's not telling the architect what it has to look like, although the board has a perfect right to tell the architect in detail what they would like to see it look like. But instead, to be sure that all the spaces that are needed to facilitate the library's program of services are there. And there are things that typically go wrong that this is designed to prevent. A very common one is lack of storage space, where somehow libraries end up with no storerooms because they didn't tell the architect, or the architect thought they were boring and got rid of them and nobody pounced. So one of the functions of the board is to pounce. And frankly, boards usually get much more involved as we go along in projects, especially in a library this large with a very large and competent professional staff. So they end up providing most of the detail, and the board initially does a lot of review. But the program will be available to anybody who wants to see it. It's a public document, and we'll just change it as needed. I've written, I think, about 200 building programs because I've worked as a consultant for a couple hundred library construction projects, which is what I started doing, frankly, as a result of not liking what was done for the Urbana Free Library expansion in the 1970s. And I became director in 75, and the expansion was mostly done. And I kept saying, I wonder why they did this. And as a result of that, I got involved in building programs. And I've written 2 books on the subject, both of which Celeste has read as a reader. And of all the people I got to read helpfully, Celeste was the most competent. So you should know that without her, it would have been much harder because I keep worrying, what have I left out stupidly now? And so she could say, Fred, that was stupid. You should have mentioned this. So programs are used in discussions with architects. They're used to support grant applications, and they are very, very much a matter of development. You put them in print, and then you mess with them. And often people keep messing until the time that architectural services begin. People are still tweaking programs. And if I'm still alive, I'll be happy to do it for you. So my job is to write, and I'm very opinionated, and I will try to hold back where I can. However, there are certain ideas that have worked very, very badly in libraries historically, and I will feel free to mention them. And you can look at me and say, forget it, Fred, and I'll forget it. But there are certain things that cause repeated trouble. My background, I was director at Urbana from 1974 till 2007. And I've been on the faculty of the U of I since 1970. So I came here as a renegade professor, and I think you know the rest. So why don't we just begin by asking you, is there anything that you feel very strongly about you'd like to see in an expanded library?
Fred, I have a threshold question for you, and that is, how confident are we about the nature of library services and collections going forward? In other words, over history, you've seen times where the evolution of libraries and of information storage has changed exponentially, and other times it's been more level. Where are we right now?
Use of borrowing of physical books in libraries is down slightly. Urbana has always had an unusually high level, but it's hard to tell right now, and we'll know a lot better when the world pulls itself back together. So it's a great question to ask in 18 months. Luckily, you won't be raising money in 18 months, I presume. So there's time, but the main secret, I think, of designing a library is flexibility. And this is the most important thing, is we have much more confidence that we'll need the space than we have confidence in how we'll use it. And so to the extent that the space is extremely flexible, the board and staff protect the long-term future of the library. For instance, if you look at the latest edition, it's basically 3 wide open floors. And that was done intentionally to make it easy for the library to adapt in the long run. It's always harder when you have an existing building because it limits what you can do. And this building was built in 3 steps, and eventually you'll do a 4th if you stay with this building. And so, but to say what's going to happen, frankly, if I knew that, I would be a very impressive person, but I'm not. And this is, it is something we're all wondering about. Public libraries are full of people who want to read physical books. They're full of people who come in because they can't figure out the internet. They're full of people who come in for all kinds of other electronic services. They're full of people who want to come and hang out in the library because it's a friendly, comfortable place. So all of those, I think, intermingle, and it changes. I watch academic libraries and the same thing happens. They're having more and more student discussion spaces. But at the same time, the books are there And in the academic world, I think the big loss is going to be academic journals, research journals, because the readership per copy is fairly low. And I think we're going to see that's going to be something that will happen. I think public library magazines will continue, some unabated, some have vanished, but it's public libraries, I think, are much less severely hit by changes, electronic changes, than have been academic libraries.
So I hear a couple things from that. One is flexibility is always
Yep.
important, no matter what era that you're in. And the other is that space will continue to be needed. It's not like because of electronics, we can get rid of our stacks in
No.
libraries. We may replace our stacks with other things that are resources, but we don't ever imagine that reducing our space needs. Okay, well, I've said enough, and that's a good intro, I think, to the rest of you. Questions and comments from board members. I have another one, but I'll bring that up at the end, after I give everybody a chance.
So Fred, I have a thought. Well, it's actually about natural light, which I really love in a library. But then you take a look at this increasing use of computers and electronic devices, and sometimes bright sunshine shining onto a screen is not necessarily an advantageous thing. So as we're trying to think ahead of like, what's the function of these spaces going to be? How long are electronics going to continue to be a thing? Maybe the electronic screens themselves will become more sunlight friendly. We're already seeing that. But when I think of expanding, one of the really nice features of the Urbana library is the large quantities of natural light. And so I think we've done a good job of putting computers in spaces where there's not so much light. So I'm kind of curious what the thoughts are on natural light versus these electronic uses nowadays.
Well, you obviously know exactly what the issues are, and that is that we like natural light, but glare is inimical to library use. And so what we really want is bright, friendly, low glare lighting that's controllable. And that's the problem with skylights. That's why they cause so much trouble in libraries. In addition to leaking, is that they're too bright by day and they're too dark by night. And so that they cause a lot of troubles. Urbana had one small skylight and it got yanked out in the last expansion. In fact, it was in the director's office and it leaked a lot. So I knew it personally. But normally what it really means is that we hunt for as much north light as we can find, because that typically works well with almost all kinds of equipment. And we're very, very careful about light from the southeast and west. And it really means that we have to have careful methods of controlling glare and direct light. For instance, the fact the Urbana Free Library has no west windows is no great loss to civilization. Because in Illinois, western sun is the hideous light in libraries. And you have to have extremely good blinds to control it. So it's like in the winter, the southern sun can be blinding. And you can see examples of libraries all over the place where they have real trouble, especially where if you've ever been to the library in Muhammad, it's a very nice building, but the architect put in a row of southern windows up above on a very high wall, and they're too high up for blinds, and they had to put in darkening film on the windows and all kinds of other things to control the glare. And even then, when the glare in this late, in summer, midday, when the sun is low in the south, when the glare comes in, people move. So I think the only real secret, except with north light, is to have blinds of some kind. And there's a lot of options. But does that answer am I responding to your question? Light's really important, but you've got to be able to control it.
Yeah.
And there are ways. And I'll put them in the program. And then if you don't like what I'm saying, you can throw it away.
Great question and great answer, and exactly the sort of thing I think is useful and a role we can play as board members. These sorts of things can be quite useful.
The board is amazingly important when it comes with the architect. Because if you have a really good architect, everything is great. But if you have an architect that thinks he knows more than the board and staff do, then you have to have the board look the architect in the eye and say, you're wrong, don't bring that up again. I worked in one library that had a wonderful board, and the board and I and the director and the assistant director and the architects were at every meeting. And every 15 minutes, the board would look at the architect and say, no. And the architects did not come to the ribbon cutting. It's a nice library.
Not good.
But
Well, that's a little intimidating, Fred, because now I know you are going to be rating us when we're done. Because if you have a spectrum of who's good and who's bad, we're going to find out where we fit.
academic background, I'll just do a comparative grading. Yes,
That's
sure.
right. You're great on the curve.
I have to admit this, being asked was a lot of fun because I've spent so much of my life in this library.
Yeah.
So that makes this a very entertaining.
Oh, I'm sure. And you know every square inch. Okay, other comments?
Nobody will be surprised to hear that I'm concerned about the green building issues, and particularly when you're starting from scratch, using the sort of one chance you have to do geothermal, because you can't really do that retrofitting. Or solar you can put on as needed. And the other points mentioned in the little green building issue questions here are all good.
Good.
And so I think it'll be a challenge to both be very serious about that, which is really, as we know, a super important long-term thing. And as we're learning, also do very good ventilation and filtering, because that unfortunately is also an important long-term thing, and it's going to come up every flu season, actually, as people are more aware of it. And there's a little tension between those things, low energy usage and good ventilation, but I think it can be handled.
Will you lecture to my course?
There's better people. Scott Willenbrock should be the guy you get to lecture to your course. But
I have an architect who comes who's a very, very practical architect, and I bring in people I know from engineering. And obviously energy saving is tremendously important, and the question is, what are the penalties that go with it? For instance, geothermal requires drilling a lot of wells. Do you have enough open space to drill wells in? And you have to check to make sure that the geology is commensurate with geothermal.
Sure.
And I'm getting out of my depth on that if I'm not very careful.
Just a comment. People have done geothermal around the neighborhood in Urbana.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, it is, whether it is at that particular location, I don't know. But if other people aren't doing it, you can drill out and use more area than
that's great.
Than the library plot itself.
I've worked on libraries that did geothermal, but they hired that expertise because my expertise was space planning. So, but that's fun. The issue of ventilation becomes increasingly important now because of COVID-19. My personal conviction is it will not be the final time this happens. I think I think flu has been transmitted too easily in badly ventilated buildings.
Yes.
I'm amazed this year how low statistically the deaths from flu were. They've been running in the past a lot, 35,000 a year in this country.
Those non-pharmaceutical interventions we did that were struggling with COVID with its R naught of 4 or 5 or something, flu has R naught of 1.5 or something, it's basically wiped it out. Yeah.
Right. There are limited things you can do in a historic building with energy saving. And I think you just have an architect who's oriented that way to look for ways. But when I came to Urbana, it was lit with 300-watt floodlights pointing downward. And you can imagine the energy load that had and the glare.
Yeah.
And they were in canisters that were all painted black inside, so that when the light spread out from a flood, it hit the inside of the canister and all it did was burn out the wiring. So we cut them down to 150 opening day. And then we found they came up with the bulbs with a better configuration. We were able to cut to 75. And considering that for every 3 watts of lighting energy you cut 1 watt of heating energy.
Yeah.
We basically got rid of the entire energy load for lighting the building. And we also threw all those light fixtures away with great rejoicing when the building was last expanded. But I'm sure that Celeste can show you pictures of the building, but looking up was a really unpleasant experience. So when you looked up at the top shelf in the stacks, you really wished you hadn't. And so part of the trouble in libraries is that we have to provide soft, even, bright light on the book spines and the stacks, which means that you have to think carefully about how you provide the light. And the best way I've ever seen is to bounce it off the ceiling, which means that the light comes from everywhere and there's no intense source. And the worst thing is recessed down lights, which are incredible glare and put the light where you don't want it, which is right in your eyes. So, and if you have fixed stacks, there are even better ways to light them, but the trouble is then they're fixed stacks. And the building was last designed for flexibility, which means you providing for one specific location for shelving doesn't work. There's a lot you can do with ventilation. One of the things we try to control in libraries now is humidity. And the dehumidification is easy with an old building, but humidification can be a real trick. And you can get all kinds of humidity problems in walls, et cetera, that weren't designed for that. But that's for your engineers to look at. There are whole lists of things you can look at as possible ways of saving energy. I think the best thing, considering libraries need lots of good illumination, one of the best things that's happened is increasingly efficient light sources. And LEDs basically they're converting almost 100% of the energy to visible light. And so we're kind of reaching the limit there. But I think it's amazing what's happened, because I remember incandescent lights, and you think of the, they wouldn't pass any energy code known to man now. So they're gone from libraries. But it's a fascinating area, and I look forward to your input when you're dealing with hearing what you and the architects have to talk about. I think it'd be fascinating.
And the deal that Fred and I have is that every 20 minutes or so, I give a warning of it's been 20 minutes. We've got about an hour. So Fred, this is the 20-minute mark. We've got 40 minutes left.
Okay. Well, this has been a lot of fun. It's fun to just talk and listen to your interests.
Charisse.
I guess what I'm thinking about too, kind of dovetailing off of what Michael's the internal environmental issues, like you were talking about humidity and the light, and how too much heat can dry out your sources, and too much humidity can cause mold and everything else. You don't want that. So when we're looking into HVAC system or whatever, and if we're especially if we're talking about expanding the area of the library and everything else, how do we go about actually kind of evaluating with the flexibility, and because you want something flexible, you want something that's going to keep with the zoning, the technology of the time. How do we go about getting something that will be flexible enough that could take care of those issues as well? That's the thing that worries me when I think about,
as I said, I'm not an HVAC engineer, so I can get myself in trouble pretty quickly. But I think the main thing is that technology keeps changing, and the time comes when you're actually expanding the building. Then you start talking with the engineers about the state of the art at that time and what you can do. One of the things I've been concerned about with a lot of clients recently is control of microorganisms in the air supply. For instance, now we're using ultraviolet bulbs in the air handlers, and they put out a dangerous form of light, ultraviolet C, but as they're inside the air handlers, those are the big boxes up in the attic where the air flows through, where the filters are and everything else. But it's one of the ways of dealing with the COVID-19, because when the air comes out, it has no life in it whatsoever. It smells fine, et cetera, but all the microorganisms have magically died in the handling. So, it's been around a while now, because I was just reading today about replacement of UVC bulbs, how frequently? And so now it's becoming a standard technique. Now, one of the things I think it helps is if you were doing something that is kind of everyday, then everybody understands it and how it works. And I always get scared when somebody wants to try some brand new engineering idea on a library, because I think, what if it doesn't really work very well? Heating and ventilating and air conditioning is maybe a quarter of the cost of a library building, public library building. So it's a lot of money you don't want to spend and then wish you hadn't. And that's why you have a good architect and great engineers. And I'm impressed with your vocabulary because you know what you're talking about. So have you worked with buildings with heating and ventilating issues?
No, I've just had to deal with my mom's air conditioning and
Okay.
and getting the wiring right.
Yeah.
But
Anyhow,
I feel that as climate change happens and as we are continue going forward, at least in years, there's going to be a whole, I agree with you. You said you think COVID is just the beginning of all of the other issues that we can have. And what I want to see, and it's almost impossible to predict what's next, I know, but I know that there has to be a system of keeping down molds and keeping that in that indoor environment relatively static on some level, so that it not only is good for the books but good for people. And I think that's my worry, is as far as trying to expand out into the size of the building or anything like that. It just having the rooms or the area be so that it's eco-friendly as for everyone and everything except organisms, I suppose.
At this stage, I'll put what I can on basics of HVAC for libraries in the program. And then I would hope that you would look at it and say, we don't want this, we'd like it this way, et cetera, because it's, but as I said, it's changing. And if this building is, let's say you start construction in what, 5 to 10 years, does that sound right, Celeste? I don't know, John. But you're not going to start tomorrow. And usually the HVAC engineering is basic because of the size of the air ducts. But beyond that, a lot of the machinery selection comes fairly far along in the process because they're being upgraded all the time. The journals I read have there's new HVAC equipment coming along regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And in a public library, you don't want your humidity getting a lot over 50%, because then you start getting mold. By 70%, you can get mold on the books, and you don't want that. As far as for human comfort, no, we're not dealing with rare books, except for the archives. But it's not like the University of Illinois rare book room. And rare book rooms can say to the engineers, we'd like it to be 50% humidity plus or minus 0.5%. The U of I had things go totally awry once. But the main thing is to get it in print. As far as damage to materials, low humidity, microforms are sensitive and they will crack. Microform will crack when the humidity gets down maybe 10 or 15%. So that can be a real problem. But in terms of books in general are more sensitive to high humidity than they are to low. But if the humidity changes all the time, it can, hydroscopic materials can expand and contract, and that's hard on them. But I think that's something you'll want to review very carefully with your architects and engineers. But it's great your interest in that area. As I said, it's hard to know where we're going to save energy next, because people in books have to coexist in a library, and whatever the ratios of the two are. And they both need a certain degree of humidity control. And so that's the money's there, and they, if the library temperature drops down to 60 in the winter, people are going to be very, very unhappy. And they're also, every time the temperature drops, the relative humidity goes up. And so that's kind of a mess.
Mhm.
So, but all I can do, I think, in the program is just put a strong statement about HVAC and efficiency, and then hope that when the time comes, your engineers and architects do the best they can with the choices that they have to make. I've seen systems for turning the lights off automatically in libraries, and they have been, by and large, incredibly unpopular with the public, who don't like to have the lights suddenly go off in the next aisle because they find that incredibly spooky. And I keep thinking they'll come along with a dimming device where they'll maybe 2 out of 3 LEDs will switch off when there's nobody nearby. So the light's dimmer and brighter, but I haven't seen that in a library yet. But that's the only thing I can think of for lighting once we get past the conversion to LEDs, because I say this, it's hard to get more efficient than 100%. So
Yeah, what I hear from that is state of the art is great until it's not.
that's right. And so I said, I every time a library I work on decides they're going to be the first kid on the block to get some new machinery, I think,
Yeah, I don't think we want that.
do we really want to do this? And you get things, there are libraries that put in heating and cooling systems where, to save money on electric, this was to save not energy, but to save dollars, they would freeze water at night when electricity was cheap in the summer. And then when the cost went up during the day, then they would use the ice to cool the building. And first, that presumes you're always going to have that cost differential in energy. And second, it introduces all kinds of extra problems. But I've seen them, but I haven't heard of them being used much in recent years. I think the main thing is that they're just inherently efficient operation. And the problem is, of course, we want buildings that smell good and that are safe, and that means more fresh air. And there are all kinds of ways of transferring temperature between outgoing air and incoming air. So you don't send cold air out in the summer and hot air out in the winter, but you shift the energy. So
Fred, we're at half an hour. We're
Half
halfway
hour.
through.
thank you. So I've been talking with all your staff, listening to them talk, and the Celeste has been very good with time warnings, because probably being
Some of us need them more than others, by the way.
pardon?
And some of us need them more than others. Not you, by the way, but
Well, I'm
just saying.
that's the downside of being a professor is there's nobody to tell you to shut up. And it's a valuable lesson. So Celeste always warns me that I'm about to run out of time and I better watch it.
Well, so I want to, I mean, it's great to get into the depth that we've gotten into so far. But I'm also kind of craving takeaways. And so I'm hearing some really good ones. We talked about flexibility. We talked about expertise. We talked about state of the art. Looked at learning from mistakes of others. We looked at the time frames, having enough time to explore. Yep. And to not commit in a way that we might regret. I hear a lot of really great kind of touchstones for us as we go through this process. Okay, somebody else who hasn't had a chance to talk yet.
The only issue I'd like to raise is access.
Yeah, Jane.
There's access to the building, because I noticed when people come in with kids, they have to get on one elevator, struggle 3 or 4 kids onto one elevator, get off, and then go to another one to go downstairs.
And Jane, I'm having trouble understanding you. It may be my speaker and my.
Fred, Jane, with your permission, I'll forward your question. So Jane raised the issue of access and how, in our particular case, we've got different elevators dealing with different places, and I'm sure it was a Hobson's choice when those decisions were made because of the different eras of the buildings and configurations. How do we work on the access question going forward with our current physical plant?
Well, it's a fascinating and frankly interesting issue. I just finished a section of a book on accessibility writ large, not only for people in wheelchairs, but for people in walkers or for people who have diminished, not blindness, but diminished eyesight. And there are ways of approaching all of these issues, but it's interesting to write about. But the big problem the Urbana Free Library has is that you have one security point, and you have to have in order to pay for the staffing, most libraries have a single security point, which means that you enter the building and go through security, and then you go anywhere you want. And the fact that the library connecting the elevator connecting the 3 floors is pretty far to the east is because that's where it was when the building was last expanded. And the idea was to have a central entrance facing the parking lot and facing south toward Green Street, and then have a way of maintaining security. Other ways you can put a security point at every floor, but that's a staffing issue. You can put a security point in the lobby, so you at grade level, so you go past security, through security, and then you go on a single elevator to all 3 floors. And those are, or you have, use both elevators, but those are all kind of architect questions, I think, rather than program questions, because in the program, it'll just say the library is a security point, you go past security, you go in the building. And I assume it'll say that, maybe it won't. But the issue of how do you maintain security while not spending a lot of money on staffing doors is a real issue. If you go to Northwestern University, it's a large, complicated building in 2 buildings connected very poorly, and they have only one entrance. And they closed all the others because they didn't want to spend the money on staffing. So you go to one place and then you wander out, and the whole historic library is down the hall and around the corner. In fact, from the only entrance, you have to take stairs or an elevator down to the basement and go down a basement hallway and then re-emerge in their historic library. I know, have anybody here been in Northwestern's library? And I would not recommend that architect to anyone.
Read a little anecdote. When we were doing college tours, my daughter decided she had no interest in going to Northwestern because she hated the library. She found it very unpriced, and she took it off. Just, nope, horrible library. Yep, won't even consider it. We're like, really?
Well, I admire your daughter right away. I used to take my students there just as a bad example, but I thought after a while, it's kind of a downer to go on a field trip and see a library like that. But in 30 seconds to tell you, Northwestern's new edition has stacks arranged like the spokes of a wheel, and it causes an endless variety of horrible problems, including the fact that at the narrow end, they're too narrow to meet accessibility codes, and they intermingled the stacks with the air supply, so you can't move the shelving because the ductwork is built into the shelves.
Oh, gosh.
So, and the faculty love it because every floor has faculty studies on around the edge. So you get to sit and look at Lake Michigan and do your work. But as far as a library goes, it's pretty wretched. So at any rate, your daughter has great taste. And that's University of Chicago got by a lot better. Same architect, same year, but the director at the University of Chicago was a tyrant who wouldn't put up with any crap from anyone. And in Northwestern, a faculty library committee made all the decisions. Nobody who knew anything about libraries as a librarian had got to say anything about Northwestern.
Jane, did that answer your question?
Yes.
I'm talking too much. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Good. Anecdotes are good. Get our attention. Okay, thank you, Jane. Other comments from somebody who hasn't had a chance to jump in? Mark.
I wanted to know, as the new building is being built, as far as the Internet of Things, whether the building is going to be smart, and then how will it tie to the older part of the building?
Well, if I
Smart
understand,
technology.
luckily, it's pretty straightforward to pull electronic communications. Sometimes you got to struggle to find a place to put the wire because the building was not built with wiring trays, for example. And so, but usually, I run into libraries, they have a horrible time with heating and ventilating systems because ductwork is huge. You know, if you want to increase the speed of the airflow, it will start making a noise because it's not big enough. But luckily for electronics, most of it is a matter of pulling more wire, and you've got to have closets because the wire, you know, can run only what 100 meters, and you've got to have a booster along the way and so on. But I think making it compatible is probably not going to be a horrible challenge for the board. My guess is that the much greater challenge will be air handling and energy control and air handling than it will be in with communications. But God knows I'll be wrong about something, and you can point to me and laugh. But so far, the libraries I've worked on haven't had major problems with the wiring. So
That's a great question, Mark, and it does remind me. This sort of makes the point we were talking about before. There was a window in time where new construction all had wires, they had Ethernet wires or similar wires, because everyone needed to have a connection to their computers. And then, not very long after that, wireless became the coin of the realm. And of course, all the people that, you know, they thought they were real smart with the wiring, they didn't really need to do it after all.
yeah, that's true. I know. I visited a lot. First one I ever saw was St. Louis Public, and that they had marvelous so data communication, wireless, and it worked beautifully. And I couldn't believe it because we'd all been stretching wire. But it keeps changing. But I think it helps again with flexibility. If you have a drop ceiling like the Urbana library, like your library has now, you can always add another wire above the ceiling. And the other thing is you can't have a hunk of wire longer than about 300 feet without having to have a wiring closet and I don't know the right terminology here, but you've got to boost the transmission every 300 feet. But so at any rate, does that answer it, Mr. Pelmore?
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Great question. Somebody else.
I've got one. You know, speaking of flexibility, we've learned a lot in the last year that outdoor spaces create flexibility that we don't always have with indoor spaces.
Yep.
So are outdoor spaces incorporated in the program, or are there things that we should be thinking about in looking at how we use the space around outside the building?
Yes, they are. And typically we don't talk in the program about how you would use your existing space, but we would talk about what kinds of features you want that make it possible to do things out of doors that you'd like to do. So for instance, the terrace on the south side of the library was made possible because the library board had the building that stood there demolished. It was an insurance building, and it was a law building. It was Winkleman Law Offices.
Right.
And they were, you know, I knew Wendell Winkleman very well, you know, in his family, but the building was solid and well built and in the wrong place. And the board moved swiftly and had it removed. And that was, I think, very much the right thing to do. But, you know, I think spelling out the things you'd like to be able to accomplish out of doors is a very good idea. So if there are things you would like to be able to do out of doors, I think that's the kind of thing to put in the program, and not say we're going to put it here or here or here, because, you know, it's like with, you know, with the indoors, you're not going to say in the program what becomes of the old front reading rooms. I think the other thing with the program is the program has to be one that could be used for new construction. You may never in the world want to do that, but I think if the program is written in such a way it works for either new construction or expansion and remodeling, it's a more, it avoids getting into specific decisions that are premature. So these are the spaces we need when we're done. So if you have ideas for external activities, I think it's wonderful to get them in the program.
Lupe, that was an awesome question. And I was going to bring this up later, but since it fits right in what you're talking about, I do think that when you go outside the doors of the library, it doesn't mean that it can't be incredibly valuable and meaningful space in the community. And one thing that I've noticed in a lot of places, not just libraries, is that the role of a building like this to be a community center.
Mhm.
And that's not just the interior of the building. And one thing that Urbana, we have the wonderful Lincoln Square where I am right now, that kind of came in at a time where downtowns were being decimated and revitalized it. And hopefully that's something that we'll be back to that point, and the hotel will have something to do with that potentially. There are some unknowns that we'll probably get answers to over the next several years that will impact the way that the exterior of the library can be used and maximized. But one thing that I see about it is I think there's going to be something positive at where the hotel is, hopefully a hotel. The church will continue to be a positive place. The other two corners are controlled by us. And so I think that as we plan, we should think outside the box, and we should imagine how this corner, and now that we have the corridor going to campus, which has greatly improved access. I think it will be to our benefit as a staff and as a board to look at it as those four corners working together and making that a town square, making that a place where people will come. And Celeste and I have already had conversations about the use of the lot that's on the northwest corner where we have art right now temporarily, and where the parking lot is. It's sort of anchored though by that green space as a spot to do something that could be a focal point. And we will continue to have discussions. I have some ideas that Celeste and I have discussed that we can kick around as we make progress. But I just think it's good to challenge ourselves to think of what we're going to do, not just within the four corners of the building, but also as we move out into that particular intersection.
It's exciting to think what you can do. You know, the library board has spent, pretty close to 50 years acquiring land on that block, because it had the 1918 building and nothing else. And it bought one site and knocked down a building to make the 1975 edition possible. And it bought the Jake's house, which was taken down to make the last edition possible, or fell down actually. But my entire career here, we were always angling to buy property, and we'd buy it whenever the owner was prepared to sell, and usually we could outweight them. The city had a major battle with Bob Alder over one of the houses on Green Street, the one that had the tree growing through the front porch. But the city bought it. So
took a long time, but it finally happened.
Pardon?
It took a long time, but it finally happened.
That's right. And so it was always something going on that way. So when I would meet with the library board, they were always speculating on what would be bought next. So it's fun to see. But I've worked mostly on public libraries, and the thing that protects public libraries better than any other kind of libraries, library boards. It's amazing how influential and positive library boards are. Because I watched academic libraries get in trouble because there was no equivalent of a library board watching out for the library. And the same thing with high school libraries. And, I'm losing my train of thought here.
Well, we're on the right track with the kind of comments that you're getting, I think.
I think but a library board is incredibly influential. And I know I can give boring examples even from Urbana of how when things weren't going right, the library board stepped in and made it run right. So you have a chance to do something incredibly powerful and permanent for the community.
Well, okay, so my takeaway from that last conversation is, number one, each of you is important, and you bring a lot of value with your ideas. Every single one of the questions that I've heard tonight has been good. And to the most recent thing we were talking about, we need to do planning, not just for the building, but for the area around it. We need to be thinking of that and maximizing our potential. So we want to start coming.
Gloria has something. that she wants-
Gloria, I'm looking for you. There you are, Gloria. Oh, no, you're bouncing around. Go ahead, Gloria. I'm sorry.
No problem. Just to share quickly, so I have learned so much just from this past hour from each of you, just all of the different questions and information that has been shared. And I jotted down some notes as I was going through the guided discussion, just to kind of help me think of different things so I can just quickly share them for the record. And really, they had to do mostly with the last question that you brought up, or comment that you brought up, John, with regard to really using the library and the physical space to enhance people viewing the library in general as a friendly, open, intuitively navigable community space that is, accessible for people from all walks of life. And I would love to see it also, to that Lincoln Square Mall point, continue to build on existing and new symbiotic relationships, kind of like the one that's happening just across the street with Cunningham Township and so many other things, in order to make the library just even more of like a landmark, right? So having some of those external visible features that are drawing people there as a destination site, while still preserving kind of the historic character of the library. And so when I'm thinking about some of those external pieces, I think those are things that I get really excited about. And in terms of added space, I'm not sure if like all of these remarks are like building appropriate, so just filter out what you will. But in terms of new and expanded spaces, some things are just like some more of those meeting spaces that can be flexible, whether for student discussion or for other community needs. I know that upstairs the second floor with those 2 study rooms, having more than that would be terrific. Also having expanded flexible outdoor programming and social space. So like the ability of like the Champaign Public Library with their food truck festival, etc., just to draw so many people in the community together. That would be really cool when we're thinking about how to utilize the outdoor space. Parking, I think, is on everyone's mind. Another thing that I thought of was just bathrooms. Just having more of them on more floors. And I think the final was, I don't know about like staff space needs, but how are we thinking about those needs and how they may change, and thinking about, when having enough flexible space to be used for all sorts of different things, whether it's staff needs or programmatic needs, shelving, information needs, etc. But can even staff space be flexible in that way, or kind of what are we thinking there?
Outside of office space, things can be quite flexible. It's for instance, one of the things just talking about recently has been what to do about used book sales. But the library runs some of it, the Friends run some of it. Why does it have to be in a bunch of little corners when it could be in all in one room? And that's one thing we discussed. Should put that in the program for the first draft, that it's all in one space because it's flexible. So if the Friends part shrinks and the library part grows, or vice versa, you can adapt. And if they're in, of course, right now they're kind of in spaces that were available. The Friends book space used to be a shelving room where they sorted books before putting them away. The library does a lot better job now because they put them away quickly. And Dawn and I have talked about that, how the last thing you need is a place to sort the books hidden away because they get left there. And now they're in a book that hasn't been put away is painfully obvious. It's a much, much better way to run a library.
Sure. I'm sorry to cut you off, Fred. Were you finished?
Sure.
Okay, Charisse, go ahead.
I just wanted to, once again, I'm dovetailing off of somebody else, Gloria, because I lived in Culver City, California for many years. The library that I frequented there, it was the Culver City Library, I guess, but it was part of the Los Angeles library system. Los Angeles County library system, because they have a city and then they have a county system.
Yeah.
But there was a room that they had designated for, and this is what I like, what because of course I went and picked up my packet and bought like 6 books while I was at the book sale. So but you could go into this room. They always had books on sale. It was like you just, and with the Los Angeles City Library, they would keep books for sale all the time
Mhm.
in the front of the library. It wasn't a particular room. They'd just be sitting there on a table, and they actually worked on the honor system, if you can believe it, since it was Los Angeles. The honor system, which was they just would have a container there. So when you decided you wanted your paper back and you were going to, put your little 50 cents in the little box there. Or you could go to, if you wanted to stand in line, you could go to the front desk and purchase it that way. But there was they trusted that people would just put their dollars in there to pay for any books that they picked up. So I was going to say too, that I think that is something that now, and you said it as well regarding book sales. We can always have I suppose a certain amount of books out for sale all the time, and we can have a certain amount of books that are in storage as we get them in and they get sorted and so on and so forth. So that we may want to actually dedicate area or some space for the just continuous book sale.
Yeah, great idea.
Certainly feasible, and it's a great way to provide board input to the program as you see it developing. Ask, are these things I'd like to see happen? Will the program as written handle them? Some of it's, you think of big open space, you have a lot of flexibility, but you want to be sure that things that are important to you as a board are represented there. So that's the time to bring it up.
We'll give Fred the last word, and thank you for your involvement tonight, Fred, and everything else that you've been doing. I want to turn to Celeste to talk about process going forward, and you can maybe put a pretty bow over that conversation we just had, and then we'll move on after you do that.
Much, Fred, thank you. He has met, one of the updates I want to provide to you is that Fred has met with all the different departments. Tomorrow, we're going to meet with someone that is very familiar with the building, with the custodial service. One of the questions that we have is what works well with the building and what doesn't. And so we're going to be spending some time in the nitty gritty of, in maintaining the building and keeping it clean, what are the things we need to be thinking about? And as we would potentially expand it, what would we want to do? Because having that welcoming environment means that the grout doesn't look awful on the floors and there are enough bathrooms, Gloria, in the right places, right? So it's been really great fun to work with Fred and all the different departments. We're hearing common themes like make it welcoming, make it flexible. People do want storage space. People want natural light. I think that we're going to have a really good first draft for you. And Fred said, you're going to start writing it tomorrow morning.
I'm probably going to start, maybe start tomorrow. I've been debating whether I do it before or after I meet with your custodian. So maybe after lunch, but at any rate, I'm figuring about 3 weeks for a draft. So, because I have other programs running at the same time with other libraries.
So I'm going to share my screen. We've developed a brief website based on a web page based on what Amanda had developed for our strategic planning process so that the public and the staff and you, the board, can see where we are. And so let me just pull that up. Back to Zoom. Take 2 seconds. Share screen. Okay. So this will be live in the next day or so. A little introduction about the building program, how it fits in with our strategic planning process, because all that we do is in service of the strategic plan. And then it talks about the timeline. So what is happening when, so people know what to expect to see and where there are. For example, under first draft released and community focus groups, we'll have hot links so people can come to this one page and get to the different documentation all at the same and in one place. And also under community focus groups, we know that some people either won't be interested in participating in a focus group or won't be able to, but would want to give a written feedback. So we're going to have a link where you can go to a webpage and provide feedback that way, and it will go into a file, and then Fred will incorporate that information into the next iteration of the plan as well. So it's simple, but it is going to get the information out there for people to see.
Outstanding.
One thing
And
I
so
would,
I'm really happy. Staff had some really great ideas. So for example, in circulation, it seems very obvious, but one thing a person said is, we just need some extra space because this library is always doing something new. So can we just have a little bit of extra space for whatever the next new thing is? And that's a really nice idea, just like 10 by 10. Give me a 10 by 10 space for behind the circ desk because something's going to come up and we're going to need to put it somewhere.
well, a great example is the library of things that you've introduced. You know, it takes real space. And I was back there watching what they done, and it's impressive, but it's a lot of fiddling around, making everything work. Taking out shelving, putting in floor space, you know, everything. But if you have a huge keyboard or a bass drum or whatever, where are you going to put it? One thing there's not time to do it, but I would like to ask the board, and maybe you can email me or communicate with Celeste. If you don't communicate with Celeste, if you go right to me, the first thing I'll do is share it with Celeste. Everybody has to know everything going on. And I think anytime one group, you know, as a consultant, I never will get involved in private conversations. So, and Celeste is kind of the focal point here for communications. But so if you have something you'd like to tell me, I would think it's best if you go through Celeste. You know, write me a note and send it to Celeste and she'll make sure it gets out. But I think you need to think about what things in the current library you would hate to lose, and what things in the current library you'd like to see the end of. And, you know, there should be things in both categories, but there may be things about the building that you think are really, really great and you don't want to miss them. And there may be things that you think, gee, why in the heck is it we have to put up with this? And I would hope that you would then say that as well. And the sheet that Celeste put together, this one that has the library image at the top, and at any rate, includes some questions of covering those areas of what do you want to see and what do you not want to lose and what would you just as soon lose? And there ought to be all three. And so that's important, but I think you can, you know, obviously it's not time to do it in today's meeting, but you could certainly forward it. The other thing let me mention just in 1 minute, and that is focus groups. And the question is, how do you get community input? And the best way I've ever found is through focus groups, which means bringing together a group of citizens, anything from 5, 6, 7 to maybe a dozen, to talk about a top library topic of mutual interest. For instance, mothers with toddlers, what do they need from the library? But if you have a focus group with people from all different types, it doesn't work very well. But if you get a dozen people who are interested in a specific area and kind of thrash it out between them, every once in a while, something really interesting turns up. So we'll plan to do that, but after we have a draft of the program, not try it before then.
Okay, Fred, thanks so much.
Sure.
And Celeste, thank you for summarizing that and reminding us of next steps. Fred, you're welcome to stay with us, or you can go off and start working on your draft.
What a threat. I'm going to go downstairs, and I've been at it all day, and what I'm going to do is do nothing for the next hour or so.
Okay, go enjoy a nice
Fun
glass
to
of
see you
something.
all again.
All right.
Look forward to working with you in times to come.
Thank you, Fred.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, all of you that are remaining, let's move on. That was an excellent discussion. We're going to go to item 8, which is the consent agenda. Let me read through what we've got on the list and, well, actually, let me do this. Are there any suggestions that we should remove any of this from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I'm going to read through this and then ask for a motion that we approve the consent agenda. We have the board meeting minutes of May 11, 2021. We have payroll for May 21, 2021 totaling $98,909.13. We have payroll for June 4th, 2021 totaling $98,996.45. We have bills for May 13, 2021 totaling $22,727.26. We have bills for May 20, 2021 totaling $20,438.78. We have bills for May 21, 2021 totaling $6,595.15. We have bills for May 27, 2021 totaling $39,070.53. We have bills for June 3, 2021 totaling $35,781.45. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda that includes each of those items?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Barb. Is there a second?
Second,
Seconded by Jane. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. I'm sorry. Roll the, this is the last time I got to do this. Please call the roll.
Okay. Jane,
yes,
Beth,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sharice,
Yes.
Gloria,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Michael. Where did he go? Oh, there he is. Michael?
Oh, he said yes, but
He's,
he
I
got
can see his lips move. Okay. And Lupe.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that was unanimous. The ayes have it and the motion carries. Now let's move on to item number 9, action items this evening that are individual items. 9.1, Illinet OCLC service agreement for fiscal year 22. Is there a motion to approve? We'll have discussion after is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Okay, Beth's moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Sharice. Is there discussion or anything from staff on this? Okay, yep, Celeste?
No, just going to say this is something that we need to have and we get a discount by getting it through the state library.
Outstanding. Any other comments or questions? Becky, please call the roll.
Jane,
yes,
Beth,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sharice,
Yes.
Gloria,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lupe.
Yes.
Okay, it was unanimous. The ayes have it. The motion carries. On to 9.2, the Rails invoice number 8022 for $11,571.06. Is there a motion to approve?
move approval of the Rails invoice.
And that was a motion, Jane?
Yeah,
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion on 9.2? All right, Becky, call the roll, please.
Jane,
yes,
Beth,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sharice,
Yes.
Gloria,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lupe.
Yes.
And that also was unanimous. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. On to 9.4, revised fiscal year 21 budget. Yeah, I know Celeste, you'll probably want to talk about this. But is there a motion to approve first?
Fiscal 21 or fiscal 22, John? Fiscal 22 is first.
I thought we just did 22.
No, we just did Rails.
Oh, we did. I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. Then, yeah, let's have the motion on 9.3.
So moved.
A second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that?
I'm sorry, who seconded that? Was that you, Sharice? Okay. Thank you.
Celeste, did you want to speak to this one?
Yes, we were very excited when the city reached out to say that PPRT expects to have more money than we thought. We thought it would be in the 60s, then they thought it might be in the 80s, and now they're expecting it to be 121,000, which is great. So we know that we have a lot of facilities needs. So I'm proposing that we put that extra $38,000 plus in the building maintenance and repair line. And then if we determine that there's a better need, we could bring it to you as a budget amendment, but we know that's a very solid place where there is great need for the building for deferred maintenance and such. Also, we know that there's a roofing problem at the Weber building across the street, and the 820 line, there is a fund balance of over $24,000, $24,334. We anticipate needing to use that money in some way or another for that building, and I wanted it to be in the budget so that we could actually spend out of the fund balance.
All
I
right.
have a question.
Yeah, Sharice.
Is that building insured that the insurance could actually re-roof it? By any chance?
It's wear and tear. It's general agedness of the building. We have asked.
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say we've had hailstorms and wind and all other kind of stuff. It seems like maybe we can finagle. No. Okay.
Good effort. Any other questions or comments about 9.3? Seeing and hearing none, Becky, please call the roll.
Jane,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sharice,
Yes.
Gloria,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lupe.
Yes.
Okay, and that was unanimous. And so the ayes have it, the motion carries. And now on to 9.4, which is the revised fiscal year 21 budget. Is there a motion to approve? And then we'll ask Celeste to talk about that as well.
So moved.
Moved by Lupe. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Jane. Okay, now discussion and anything from
So years and years and years ago, when we switched over from the old financial system to the Munis system, we didn't catch that there was a mistake in the system. And so we've been doing catch up over the years of making sure that everything is aligned the way it should be. And so at some point in time in working with the auditors and doing end of year calculations, one of the things didn't get done correctly and it got carried over. So Becky and I noticed it and have talked to the auditors about it. It shows that we've got more money or we owe money to the city that we don't actually owe. It's been paid, but we need to clean it out in the financial system. So we need to move some money over from a couple of lines into one particular line, which we're choosing is cafe supplies, to do a one-time fix to the systems, given what the auditors has said will clean the books up to be fully accurate, as far as we can tell. So we know that we're not spending money on cafe supplies, so we know that this will be an anomaly as a one-time thing. So it seems like the right place to put the money as the holding spot than to pay it out within the system. So that is what we're asking to do, is follow the auditor's advice.
any questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, Becky, please call the roll.
Jane,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sharice,
Yes.
Gloria,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lupe.
Yes.
Yeah, that was unanimous. The ayes have it and the motion carries. And we'll go on to 9.5, which is nomination to appoint library staff member to the Urbana Public Television Commission for a July 2021 to June 30, 2024 term. Staff has asked that we do this. Do you want to give any more background? Let me go ahead and we'll get it moved and seconded. Could we have a motion to approve that?
I so move.
Barb, I think that was you. Is there a
Yes.
second?
Second.
Second from Jane. Okay. Celeste, you want to fill us in on that?
Yes, I am delighted to say that Carol Inskeep has done this job of being the commissioner, the representative of the Urbana Free Library on this commission since 2006. And that is 15 years of service. And she is talked to a couple of staff people, or we've talked around, and Sarah Bennett, our new archivist, is interested in taking on this responsibility. The UPTV Commission meets 4 times a year. Carol is going to talk to Sarah about attending the last meeting of the quarter, which is this Friday, and we'll coach her up on all of the good things that UPTV does and how having a member of the library on that commission it's in the city code, but it's also great for the library to know what's happening in the community. Sarah is the primary person who does the programming in the archives, and being new to the library system as a whole since last fall, this is a really great opportunity for her to get out in the community in a new way. So we recommend to you to nominate Sarah Bennett, archivist in the archives.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or any questions for Celeste about that? Seeing and hearing none, Becky,
Great.
please call the roll.
Jane,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sharice,
Yes.
Gloria,
Yes.
Mark,
Mark?
Mark,
Yes.
There we go.
Michael,
Yes.
Lupe.
Yes.
Okay, that was unanimous. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you. We got through all those pretty quickly. Item 10, discussion items. Are there any discussion items tonight that we haven't already covered? All right, 11, reports of the liaison officers. So starting with 11.1, Friends. Anything on
Barb, if
Friends?
you would, I can show, Barb, I know you're not here in the building, but I could show what the auditorium looks like right now as your liaison here. The Friends are sorting for the next book sale.
Oh my,
Oh, right.
looks like the books are appropriately socially distanced.
So Eleanor Brown, our amazing manager of outreach, for volunteers and circulation in the cafe, has worked with the Friends to have a pop-up book sale this past weekend using Friends sorted materials. And she made over $600 with the Friends materials that have been vetted. And it was really a lot of fun. And, the Etsy store is doing well, and the Amazon store is doing well. And the Friends came in to sort all these donations that we couldn't store behind the circulation desk. They're just boxes and boxes of them. And so they're energized. And they said, with the state opening up, with us moving to phase 5 soon, they said we should have a book sale in August. They thought they'd wait till November, but they want to have one now.
Oh,
So that is super exciting. And the
Can I make a
dates,
quick correction? She
what's
actually
that?
sold- It was actually $1,300. It's $600 the first day and $1,300 total for the weekend.
Great.
Thank you for that.
golly, good mistake.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
So that was really
I couldn't help
fabulous.
myself. I came to pick up my packet, and I went, and I was like, what's that down there? Oh.
That's right, Sharice, you and the shiny objects.
And that's it. I was like, oh my gosh, a lot of war books. But anyway, and a bunch of books
They're
on
good.
Lincoln.
They're good too. And he's always good.
Yeah. So
Okay, thank you for that great report. 11.2, the foundation.
Foundation meets next week, and again, are continuing to update the different programs that they have going, whether it's the Cherry Alley brochure and looking at the Amanda, what's it called? I'm sorry, the Legacy Society of people who have been donors.
Yeah, they also just sent out a mailing to about 75 what we call lapsed donors. So people who have given in the past that maybe haven't given more recently. So we're hoping that that will re-engage some of our donors.
Sounds good. 11.3, Illinois Heartland Library System. Lupe, that's you, isn't it?
That's me. So just a brief update. Right now, most of our energy from IHLS is going into evaluating our libraries in a post-COVID world. So specifically, we're looking at not only IHLS practices, but also our member libraries. So looking at access, how do we continue to deliver materials and services safe and efficiently? Area, looking at library spaces and needed modifications going forward, and the workforce. How do we meet the evolving needs of job seekers in our community, but also as we're bringing our own staffs back into the buildings and things after a very different year. So you'll see more education materials, discussion topics, and things coming out for the IHLS community to share.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Lupe. 12.0 administrative report. Anything to add to our written report and other things that have been said?
Yes, we are getting ready for the phase 5 starting this Friday. All signs are pointing towards that being the case. We have been making incremental changes. And oops, Fred had sent me an email and it blanked out my screen. So for example, we opened up the Race Street doors. We're looking at turning on the drinking fountains. We have put chairs back at the tables to be at 50% capacity. Those have not been used fully. So we are gradually getting ready for the library being fully open.
And I'm just checking the calendar to see what we will be doing next month as we are really reopened. So that'll be exciting, won't it? We're all ready. Thanks for the administrative report. Now on to 13, which is the board and committee reports. And I think we have a nominating committee report.
We do. We nominate John to go on as president, Beth to go on as vice president, Barb to go on as secretary, and Lupe to go on as secretary pro tem.
Are you sure about that?
Well, I'm not sure about all the names of the offices actually, but basically we're saying let's keep going. It's going good.
Okay. All right. That is a motion to approve a slate. Or no, is this the first night of notice?
I think this
Yeah,
is the
I can
first
just
night
tell
on-
Celeste is poised to be Robert's Rules of Order extraordinaire to tell us that tonight we're just reporting on, we're announcing the slate. Okay, so no action tonight. All right, there's still a chance, Beth, we might get out of town here. They could change their mind. The moment of insanity. Okay. Thank you. Anything else? That it for the nominating report?
That's it.
All right. Then board president report. I don't have anything to add. It's been a great meeting. I love it when every minute of the meeting is used efficiently, and I think that's what's going on here. We're talking about important stuff that's interesting, and every single one of you has contributed to having a great meeting tonight. Any unfinished business? Any new business? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
To adjourn.
Moved by Beth, second by Charisse. Call roll. Let's do it the one last time. I've been kind of backsliding on this one, but since this is our last Zoom meeting, at least for the foreseeable future, till the next pandemic, Becky, call the roll.
Jane,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Charisse,
Yes.
Gloria,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lupe.
Yes.
We're done.
We are done. Thanks, everybody.